roll the video.
The quote that we always hear from Einstein about the bees is that if we lost them, we would have 4 years to live. There are always uncertainties with a rescue because you just don't know what you're going to find until you open them up.
My dad bought this farmland around this house about 10 years ago. We noticed just a big swarm of bees on the second floor. So at the time, they relocated that swarm, but 5 years later, we noticed a new hive was down here on the lower level. So that's these guys.
So a lot of folks might not think that this wild colony is worth saving. We think they're all worth saving, but especially the ones that have shown local resilience. And the comb potentially could be 8 feet tall, so it'll be amazing. Often I get rescue calls and the people say the alternative would be to poison them. It's heartbreaking to disturb something that's so perfect and amazing. If we weren't removing all the trees, they would have hollow tree cavities that they could move into instead of house walls.
At our first meeting, Alice had explained the honeybee population was dramatically declining. It was urgent that we focus on honeybee housing.
We're always interested in the challenge. Can we make it work within this set of circumstances?
So that's the top of the comb, Richard.
Gorgeous. Wow. Is this a big
Yes, it's a big, the comb is amazing. It's a big colony. There's nothing square about bees, so they build in this beautiful natural curve.
Alice has put together a team that has created this mass-producible object that has an opportunity to change our environment, and for the better, for once. We got to use all of our collaborative skill sets to do some good.
The mission of Apiopolis is to restore honeybees to a place of thriving. And by creating a better world for the honeybees, we create a better world for us. I learned to not wear gloves from the beginning because if you're wearing gloves, you can't be careful. You're interacting with tiny creatures, you'll inevitably squish them. My worry is that they're going to leave the comb, and if they did that, they would die. I'll put them in a different box, the new shelter that we've been working on, that has insulation, that has food and comb, that they can start laying babies again. The bees that we took from that cavity are like a swarm now. The dream for the new shelter has been long in my mind. I have to give them a better house. So to work with so many amazing people on designing it and having it come together like that, that is actually amazing, because I feel like that is something that I can contribute to improve things for the bees. I have to go slowly if I'm interacting with them, and it becomes almost a meditative practice of observation, of engaging all my senses, the scent of the hive, the sounds they're making, When the bees land on me, I feel like we're in relationship. There's a knowingness. Like any creature, they sense my energy toward them, and I feel like they respond in kind. Sorry about your sisters. It is a queendom, and it's the females that do all the work in the colony. It's a nurturing, creative environment. I also think of it in terms of the world. We say Mother Earth. So I always come back to what a metaphor the bees are, what great lessons we can learn from them and how they work together and take care of each other in our communities. The next time you come upon a bee on a flower, I wish that we would think about their lives and what they need and what they contribute to the world. Cheers to the bees. You guys were all amazing. It's been so humbling, so thank you all.
It's beautiful.
Isn't it pretty? That was one of the requirements. Yeah. There are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle.
Hi everyone, this is Jasmine with the Duke Energy Center for Performing Arts, and we are here with our expert beekeeper, Miss Alice Hinman from Apiopolis. She is installing our beehive, and we are so excited to have her here. Alice, do you want to tell them a little bit about what you're doing right now?
So I am moving in this colony of bees. It was an early spring swarm from my home apiary. I closed her up at 5 this morning and put a net over the hive so I wouldn't lose any of the workers if they got loose. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just opening them up, getting ready to move them in.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the structure of these hives?
Yeah, so the hives that you mostly see used in the U.S. Are the Langstroth hives. And we have been working on creating a better house for the bees that's healthier for them, based on research of how the bees live in the wild. So that would be in a hollow tree cavity. So we're working with a team of amazing designers and craftspeople and architects to make this hive. Frank Harmon, Courtney Evans with Tactile Workshop, Richard Stevenson with Flitch Furniture, Craig Dean, Architecture, Tim Martin, he's an architect, Will Hooker, to figure out how to make a new hive that's healthier for the bees and has some of the features that you would find in a hollow tree cavity. So we're still tweaking the design. This one that Richard and I just finished a couple days ago has a few new things from the last ones. But it has habitat for beneficial microorganisms that the bees would live in community with in a hollow tree cavity, symbionts. It has insulation. So trying to make the house as healthy as we can for the bees. So we're using all natural materials. The hive is finished with hemp shield. We're not using latex paint or any plastics. So I'm just knocking everybody off. I want to get everybody that I can. It's a little tight up here, so I'll be going up and down. So initially we started out with alpaca fiber as the insulation, and the bees have little hooks on their feet. And we found that anywhere they could access the insulation, they would get their little feet caught in it, almost like being caught in a spider web. So we're still trying to figure out the insulation. We think we found the perfect thing, and it's a company that will be starting to manufacture it in Maine, starting in 2022. They thought they were coming online this year, but of course with the pandemic, everything slowed down. So I'm just stuffing the envelope with straw. If you think about how we used to keep bees in skeps, which were the woven straw hives that you see, and then they were covered with clay, and but that was actually a great house for the bees, except that you couldn't harvest honey without destroying the colony. But it was actually a much better insulated house for the bees. So right now it's going to be straw. And the need for insulation, the bees spend so much energy in the winter trying to keep the cluster warm, and in the summer trying to keep the temperature cool. So they're using all that energy that they could be devoting to other vital life processes, and that energy is, of course, honey. So they need to work harder than they should to maintain that temperature. So in the winter, it's 76 degrees when there aren't any babies, and in the summer, it's 95 degrees. But if you think about the straw, each piece has a hollow chamber, so each piece of straw is its own insulator. When Reverend Langstroth patented his hives in 1852, he had a different system. There was actually an internal wall, and he said that he knew that American people who had wanted to do things as cheaply and as easily as possible would get rid of parts of his design that would be to the detriment of the bees, and that's exactly what happened. So I've already put straw in the bottom. There are symbionts that live with bees that are actually predators for some of the pests that we see in our conventional hives, like varroa mites. So we're hoping to encourage some of those beneficials. Okay. See.
Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the other predators or problems that are common in beehives?
So varroa mites are the ones that you mostly hear about now. But there are small hive beetles, which used to be, we used to consider them a secondary pest. But with temperatures increasing, we're seeing the numbers go up. There are wax moths. In nature, of course, they have a role to play. They get rid of old wax, so they kind of recycle that, and the bees build new wax, which is healthier for them. The wax holds all sorts of chemical residues, so even if you're keeping bees with organic practices or biodynamic practices, all the wax tests for chemical residues. So wax from the U.S. isn't used in body care products because it's contaminated. It also holds fungal spores. So, and of course it's environmental. There's not one solution for making things better for the bees. It has to be a holistic approach. So it's genetics and environment, the toxins in the environment. It's nutrition, so if they have enough healthy food. There are a lot of things. Shelter. So this box is full of honey. So they're in good shape.
Other than producing honey, is there a good way to tell if our bees are healthy?
Yep, so you can, I'll show you I don't know if you can see the brood pattern, but I'll point it out where the babies are. But it's a healthy, you can tell a healthy brood pattern. So this is the new comb. This swarm actually moved into this box. It was empty and they were attracted to the scents of the hive. There's lots of propolis in the comb, but they've started building this beautiful new white comb. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's full of nectar. They're busy working. And this colony is, so Dr. Seeley, who is at Cornell University, is the one who studied the feral colonies living in Arnott Forest and compared how we keep our bees versus how the bees keep themselves and made recommendations for keeping them better. He wrote an article, I think it was in 2016 or 2017 called Darwinian Beekeeping. So he recommends a certain nest size for the bees. With a smaller nest, you get less honey, but your bees are a lot healthier. It encourages swarming, which is how the bees reproduce. So you keep those healthy genetics. So this is, you can see they've started to build new comb.
Wow, yeah.
Got some old comb. So I see boy bees. Lots here at the top where it's white, that's capped honey. So this colony, I'm going to give another box. In 3 days, I'll come back and check them. You can kind of tell what's going on with a colony by where they are with their babies. So it takes 3 days for an egg to hatch. So in 3 days, I'll know if the queen is healthy and laying. It's a little bit stressful. You can imagine moving a colony. They're confused and have to find where the food is close to here. A few bees get beat up in the ride. So here, I don't know if this shows, but this is capped brood. So those are pupating bees. All the bees are capped on day 9. So we know that these babies are older. I'm just going to quickly scan each frame to see if I see the queen. So I see larvae, capped brood, got nectar and honey in the corners. And I see eggs on this side. So queen can lay over 1,000 eggs a day. That's her main job. The bees communicate with scents, with pheromones, with dancing. they tend each other. So there are lots of ways that they talk to each other, but the colony's cohesiveness, what keeps it together as a family, is the queen scent. It's queen mandibular pheromone. So a vibrant queen has a strong scent, and that makes a strong colony. When she starts to get old or if something is wrong with her, the bees will start to raise a new queen. And so that's where the genetics are really important. So I only use, I only work with the genetics of the bees that I've been working with for years, or wild colonies. The bees, so the drones are really important for a number of reasons. Genetics is one, but some of the drones have royal genetics, so the workers can tell which eggs are suitable for queens, which eggs have been fertilized by those drones with the royal genetics, and those are the ones that they decide to make into queens. There's a natural beekeeper in Vermont, Kirk Webster, who said, you know, with the decline in honeybee populations and the problems we're seeing with honeybee health, that we can blame all these different things, but just like any form of agriculture, you know, beekeeping has become industrialized too, so there's a lot to do with how we take care of them that's causing the problems.
So there are definitely a lot of bees that are kind of swarming around here. How many do you think there are in this hive, and why are you not concerned about getting stung?
About being stung?
Yes.
So a colony, you know, winter population is probably around 20,000. Peak summer population, 60,000, 50,000, 60,000 bees. So I'd guess this one's at about, gosh, maybe 40,000 now. So the bees, you know, you'll see this a lot. So they, you know, they know where their home is. You know, they always go back to their home. So they're in a completely different location now. So what we'll see is the bees orienting around the hive. They're getting their bearings. They're starting to notice landmarks so they can find their way home. The bees that you see outside the colony are the foragers, so those are the older bees. So all the bees go through these different jobs. They start out as cleaner bees. They clean the cell that they emerged from and then neighbor cells. They become nurse bees. There are all these different jobs: undertaker bees, guard bees, attack bees. So the older bees are the ones that are flying. So the majority of the population is actually are actually house bees. We call them house bees. So they're busy working. You know, they're trying to find their way around. So they don't really want to sting. If they feel like they have to defend their home, they will. So I don't wear a suit. I usually don't wear a veil, but, you know, this has been kind of stressful for them, so I'm wearing one. But I feel like if we engage with the bees, you know, they're so sensitive to energy, so if we're treating them with gently and with you know, mean them well, I think they sense that. So this one is, I've lost a piece of honeycomb. It broke off in the drive. So that's too bad. A beautiful piece of new comb, which is very fragile. Would somebody pass me that inner cover that's leaning somewhere? It's like a flat. It's right there on this leg. So this is all full of nectar, and I want to leave it so they can harvest it. Thank you. So they'll pull all this nectar out. So I'm making a lot of extra work for them, by doing this. But I don't want it to go to waste because they've worked so hard to build this comb and gather it.
What's the difference between nectar and honey?
So the nectar, of course, they gather from flowers. The honeybees, when they forage, so you can see where it broke off there. They forage on flowers when they're at their peak nectar flow. So honeybees will only gather from one plant per foraging flight. That's why they're such efficient pollinators. But you'll see some other bees, like a bumblebee, will go to a echinacea, and then I'll go to a goldenrod, and then I'll go to, and then some pollinators are specific to a certain plant. But the nectar is what they gather. They bring it back to the hive in their honey stomachs, and the bees in the hive will help them deposit it in cells. You'll see them with their proboscis, two bees sharing nectar, and they deposit it in the cells, and then they heat it. They actually heat the honey at the nectar at a higher temperature than and they keep the babies to dehydrate it, and then when it has the proper moisture content, they cap it with wax. So that's why honey will last so long. You can hear about ancient honey in the Egyptian tombs because it's capped with wax, so it can't go bad. So the honey is just capped nectar. You can see them trying to clean up the nectar that's been spilled. I'm trying to see, we call this, there's a pheromone, it's called the homing scent. It's the Nazanov pheromone, and it's the last segment of their abdomen. And they raise their abdomen in the air and open that gland and release this pheromone, and it smells like queen scent. So they are telling all the bees that are flying around, this is home, this is where the queen is. So when I see them doing that, I'll point that out too. A little bit sticky. So I'm being careful to arrange the boxes in the order that the bees are living in them. Another thing that we do in the Langstroth system is, we call it supering. So when we add boxes to increase the colony size, which is usually for production, we put the box on top. So we call them honey supers. There's another system, the Ware system, that naters. So supering is above, natering is below. So the Ware system uses just a top bar. It doesn't have the frames, so the bees can build the comb downward, which is how they would build in nature. So they start building the comb at the top and then build down. So in wild colonies, you'll see this amazing natural comb that's long that accommodates the structure that they're living in. So what researchers are finding, there's another researcher that I love in Germany, Jürgen Tautz, and I was at a conference in the Netherlands learning from the bees that the Natural Beekeeping Trust in the UK put on. And just by amazing luck, managed to room with Jürgen Tautz's researcher, Torben Schiffer. So there's this whole movement around the world, folks trying to make things healthier for the bees via shelter, like we're trying to do here, via genetics. But Torben has also created a new beehive. He's calling it the Schiffer tree, that's actually cylindrical like a tree cavity, that he found in his studies. So I don't treat the bees anymore. I studied biodynamic beekeeping, and at first used organic acids for varroa mites and counted the mites. So Torben found that he started keeping bees with his grandfather, and they treated them with formic acid, and he found on the bottom board all these honeybee antennae, and the antennae are just amazing sensorial receptors, so they can, just vital to the well-being of the bees. And the bees responded to the formic acid treatment by tearing out their own antennae. So, right away, Torben thought how horrible that experience was for the bees. So I stopped using the organic acids that are allowed in biodynamic beekeeping. But what he also found is that when we super the bees, if you think about how they build their comb downward, we're creating this void above the nest, and it's unnatural to them, so they respond, it's a stressor for them, and they respond by desperately trying to fill it. So that's how, that's why honey production is so, we're making them work so hard by stressing them. So I liken it to when we're overworked and stressed, how that impacts our health. So when we work our bees so hard, we're kind of doing the same thing. I'm going to peek here and make sure the queen isn't in here. So when they're busy trying to fill that void above the nest, they're not able to take care of themselves like they should. They can't take care of each other. You think about how we should live ourselves in community and take care of everybody to the best of our ability. So we put them in a position to not be able to do that. So when I add the last box, when I come back and check them to make sure the queen is laying, I will put the new box at the bottom. So it's kind of an artificial thing, we're making the structures so that they're compatible with the Langstroth system, because we want we want them to be widely adapted. We want everybody to be able to keep their bees in better houses. So the Langstroth frames fit in, but what we'll do in the ideal shelters, and of course this would be up to individuals, is make it so that the bees can build that natural comb downward without the interruption of the frames. So they respond to unnatural things by removing it from the hive. So there are loose bits of straw here that they'll be pulling out of the entrances.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the position and placement of the hive and what that does for the bees?
You mean the orientation?
Yeah.
It's curious because keeping them in a system like this rather than a natural, they've evolved to live in a forest environment, so they are very selective when they're choosing their new home when they swarm. So this is arbitrary where we've put them, but we've tried to pick the best locations. So in our managed colonies, and especially with increased temperatures, we want them to face southeast. Somehow the hives that have that orientation, that get the early sun, seem to have lower populations of small hive beetles. The ones in the shade always have more. So that's one main reason. In an urban environment, you want to be mindful of passers-by. So this is elevated, on their own. They would locate themselves 60 to 20 feet up in the air, not on the ground. There are problems with moisture on the ground. More of Torben's research, they tested colonies in different hives, and they found that all of the bees had mold spores in their guts, and of course that impacted their health. So from being on the ground close to that moisture, so the higher hives don't have that. So this is actually a neat idea to put them up on this platform. It's a height that they would prefer on their own. I have there's a homeowner who has 17 acres of urban forest off Ridge Road, and there was the DOT wanted to take her property to put in a clover leaf for Crabtree Valley Mall. But we started this forest bee project. So this is gorgeous. I thought it was all honey up here, but this is babies too. And drones. Maybe the queen will be up here. So we put 5 colonies on tree stands, 18 feet up in the in the trees, and it's been really, really fun to check in on those bees and see how they're doing. And those bees, I don't really do anything. I don't harvest honey from them, or it's more of kind of an experiment. But in that one, Will Hooker, he was one of my professors when I was in horticulture, and he's also an artist and a permaculture designer. But he is a dowser, so he can douse for the ley lines and the energy lines and water lines. And this is kind of esoteric beekeeping, but they found that on their own the bees would locate themselves where there are the most crossing energy lines. So it's bad for humans, like you wouldn't want your house over that, but it's good for bees and ants. And so this is capped honey, new capped honey. That's why it's so light. The more the bees walk on it, the darker it gets. That's why the comb is different colored. But Will Hooker came out and doused that forest. And those are the trees that we put the stands in and located the hives. So there's so much fascinating. This is my 12th year of keeping bees, and it's like the learning is endless. Every year I reevaluate what I'm doing, and it's hard to learn on something that you love that is alive and needs help. But yeah, just continually changing practices to try to make things better for the bees. So there's a whole rewilding movement too. That's kind of the direction I'm going in personally. But there are folks like Michael Thiele in California and others around the world that are actually building log hives. They're taking sections of tree and hollowing out the center and then hauling them up into the trees at the height that the bees prefer, and then just leaving them there for swarms to move in. The other thing Doug Tallamy, I forget what university he's at, but he wrote a book, Nature's Best Hope, and he talks about, the role we each can play in helping the planet, and that's by letting our lawns be populated with clover and dandelions, and creating habitat where we live. I forget what, Raleigh's the city of oaks. I forget how many species of Lepidoptera rely on oaks, but it's phenomenal. So if we leave our trees and let our flowers grow, I know Gretchen Sedaris is the city's horticulturist, and she plants tons of natives. So you've got natives in the beds here. There's a really pretty little wildflower border at the front. But this lawn that the bees are on, there's lots of clover. So there was a study that looked at the nutrients in the pollen. So pollen is protein. So that's what they feed the baby bees and make royal jelly with. But they looked at the nutrient density of different pollen sources and found that there are lots of limiting nutrients in the bees' diet because we're removing all the habitat. So just like us, they need a very diverse food supply to satisfy their nutritional requirements. So it's like you don't want to just eat carrots, you want to eat all the colors. So they recommended clover as an intervention strategy because it had the most diverse nutrient profile. So May is no mow May. Lots of folks are doing that. I'm doing that in my house to my neighbors this May, but letting everything grow up in May to benefit not just honeybees, but all the pollinators and insects that are coming through winter that need that. And we've talked about starting a BMO Aware campaign where we encourage folks to let grow clover in their lawns because it has it's not native, but it has a great nutrient profile for pollinators, and it can be maintained in turf. You can just let the turf grow a little bit taller so that the clover flowers and you mow and it keeps flowering. It fixes nitrogen, so you wouldn't have to fertilize. It's a legume. You wouldn't have to fertilize the lawn. It doesn't need irrigation like turf does. So there would be lots of benefits from just growing clover. But if you want a diverse population, I think dandelions and violets and all those little flowers are gorgeous in a lawn. I'm still not seeing the queen, but it's a healthy colony. So one thing that we've done, the top box is a quilt box. So we have the eco-floor for habitat for symbionts, and we have a quilt box that's insulation on the top of the nest. And if you think about in a tree, there's the mass above the nest and below. But the quilt box has wood shavings, and we'll leave that on all the time, insulation, and it also helps with moisture control. But we've built in the ability to have gravity feeders in that. So when we always go through a dearth in the summer here in the Piedmont where the bees, it's hot and dry and there's not enough forage. So sometimes I have to supplementally feed the bees, and it's best to do it inside the hive because if the colony isn't strong, that scent will attract robbers, and that can be troublesome. But if I have to, I would feed them inside the hive, and I make a medicinal honeybee tea with 10 organic herbs that helps with the bees' health. With biodynamic standards, it has to be 10% honey content, and then sugar has a different acidity. Lots of beekeepers feed their bees sugar water, or commercial beekeepers feed them corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, so you can imagine how bad that is for them. But to change the acidity so it's closer to honey, I add ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C, which is also one of the limiting nutrients in their diet, and sodium is a limiting nutrient in their diet. So I add some sea salt, and that's what I feed them supplementally if I have to. So it's not as good as honey, but it's way better than high fructose corn syrup or just sugar water. And that recipe that I follow, I learned when I was studying biodynamic beekeeping at Spike Nerd Farm's Honeybee Sanctuary with Jürgen Tautz. Jürgen wrote Toward Saving the Honeybee. He is a gentle, gracious man. But that's on their website, that recipe for the honeybee tea. So everything is sticky, so the interior wall is rough. So if you think about a hollow tree cavity, it's a rough surface, and the bees propolize the entire interior. So they gather resins from plants and trees, pack it on their pollen sacs, and bring it back to the colony, and it's called propolis, and it's a sticky, gooey substance. In the summer, that's why I use a hive tool, because everything is kind of glued together. So they use it to fill cracks. They coat the rims of the cell walls where the baby bees are. That's what's on the edge of these frames, on my fingers now. But it has medicinal properties, so you can buy a propolis tincture at a health food store if you have a sore throat. It's good for us too. It has antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral, so it has all these medicinal benefits. So this is the last frame, and I haven't seen the queen, but there are lots of eggs, so we know she's been there. So when I check, I'll see if I can find her. But the bees will propolis a rough surface. So in a hollow tree cavity, the entire interior of the nest space has this propolis shield, and you can imagine what that does to the bees' well-being. And we, we in our, like Langstroth said, in our desire to do things easier and cheaper, we were trying to breed.
You said that you're looking for the queen. What exactly do you see that makes this obviously the queen and not any of the worker bees or something else? How different does she look?
The queen, so the queen is, she has a longer abdomen. So the boy bees are, I tell kids that they look like teddy bear bees. They're big, fuzzy bees. They have great big eyes. They can't sting. So when we do stuff live, I hand them to the kids to hold. They're very buzzy, loud. So they look different, and there are a bunch of drones in here. And then the workers are smaller, and the queen has a longer abdomen. Her thorax doesn't have hair on it like you just can't see it like you can on the workers. The bees' bodies are very hairy, even their eyeballs have hair on them. But she looks different. Her abdomen is longer, and she moves differently. She kind of has a graceful walking pattern, and she has a group of attendants around her. So the only thing the queen does is lay eggs. That's her job in the hive. So the workers really control everything that happens in the colony, and so they feed her and groom her, and they take care of her so that she can focus on just laying eggs. I've seen maybe 2 or 3 small hive beetles, which is not bad. One walking around that I'll crush if I can. So moving this colony into this hive, so the interior wall is rough, so the bees will propolis it, but you can see, well, I don't know if you can see, but they have a thin film of propolis on this. They don't tend to propolis a smoothly planed surface, so that's another thing that's wrong with our hives. Now they're starting to sell hive equipment that has a rough interior wall, so the bees will propolis it, but I'm taking all this propolis out of the nest, so they'll have to work hard to replace that. Sorry for that. But what I'll do is scrape it off and save it. When I'm cleaning equipment, I make a big pile of propolis, and it's really funny. The bees they can smell it, and as I'm working, the bees are working. They're coming to that pile of propolis and chewing it up and packing it onto their pollen sacs and bringing it back to the hive. So I see some abdomens in the air, then Nasanov pheromone being released. I don't know if that's visible, but it's the last segment of the abdomen. And the varroa mites, the bees, no parasite will kill its host and survive. So the bees eventually will become resilient to the varroa mites. So that's why treatment is also kind of bad for that reason, because we're not selecting for the bees that are showing resilience. We're treating the mites preventatively, so they never get to the point where we know which bees are resilient to mites. So Dr. Seeley found that in the feral colonies, they've built up resistance to varroa. So now they're there are bee clubs around the world that are only working with their own genetics and trading. So they are selecting for the bees that are resilient.
So you mentioned Raleigh being the city of oaks, that oak trees are exceptionally great for pollinators, and also using different grass alternatives like our clover here is one good option. What other things can people do that are beneficial to pollinator colonies, honeybee colonies, and others?
Native pollinate, plant as many flowers as you can. One colony of bees needs a full acre of multi-seasonal, multi-floral blooms to be healthy, to provide its nutritional needs. That's without harvesting honey. The more flowers, the better. Letting wild spaces grow, like Doug Tallamy talks about creating this network of national parks in our own backyards and on private land. One of the problems is the fragmentation of habitat. So the more trees, you can imagine that everything is connected. There's this contiguous corridor. So plant flowers, and as much as I love bees, if we had a sustainable food system and we're eating locally produced food from living soil, then we wouldn't need to truck pollinators, honeybees across the nation to pollinate our food crops. So that's a big thing. So I would say eat local, support your local farmers who are using organic practices. We have in North Carolina the certified naturally grown. It's really expensive to get the organic certification, but you can, here I have a honeybee wrestling with a wasp, or I think the wasp is, the bee is hurt and no? There's a little squabble with this wasp and the bees. It's mostly so there. Yes, a strong colony. The entrance size on this hive. So on the Langstroth hive, the entrance is this whole opening. So that's another thing that Dr. Seeley found. Like they have to patrol that long entrance. So a smaller entrance they can guard better. But yellow jackets sometimes will go in a colony, and I've seen. Bumblebees or carpenter bees just kind of fly in, and the bees, it's fascinating, but the bees will surround whomever the intruder is with their bodies, and this is how they warm the colony in the winter. They tremble their wing muscles to create warmth. So they surround whomever the intruder is and tremble their wing muscles and basically cook it to death. So I might not leave that, since I saw that wasp, I might not leave that comb here because I don't want to attract somebody who's going to bother the hives. Or I might put it somewhere else so the bees can find it. We'll see. So yeah, you can see them orienting when the bees are about to become foragers, when that becomes their job. So the oldest bees are the ones that are outside the hive because that's the most dangerous job. So foraging for food and water. They don't drink water because they're thirsty. They use it for evaporative cooling. So they will bring it into the colony and put it on the walls and fan their wings to create this cooling. When it's really hot, you'll see the bees bearding on the face of the hive, cooling the hive. So that's the older bees removing themselves from the nest so the nurse bees can keep the nest at 95 degrees. But the older bees are the ones that are flying, collecting food, and then the most dangerous job is water collection because they can drown, so that's the last job. That's the oldest bees. But they're also, you know, they have such, they're amazing, but they'll also revert, they'll change jobs, sometimes go back and forth if the hive needs different things. So I'm gonna, before I put on the top box, I'm just gonna smoke them. So, you know, again, how they evolved to live in a forest environment and a hollow tree cavity. So we think of, folks think the smoke calms them, but what it does is it makes them think their house is on fire. So they, in a natural environment, they would revert to the farthest resources of the cavity and fill their honey stomachs up with food in case their home was destroyed and they had to rebuild all that wax. So they build the wax with honey as the energy. So it takes, gosh, I think 12 pounds of honey to produce 1 pound of wax. And they have specialized glands on their bellies, and they produce these tiny, tiny thin scales of wax from these wax glands. They look like, if you see them on the bottom of the hive, they look like little shimmery bits, but they have a specialized hook on their back leg that they reach under their belly, hook the scale of wax, bring it to their mandibles, and when they're building the comb, you can see them strung on the bottom of the comb, and they're all working together to create that fantastic pattern. It's amazing. But I'm going to smoke them around the edges just to kind of corral them back into the colony so I don't hurt anybody. So you're, oh my gosh, when I was studying at Spikenard, Günther likened smoking the entrance as ringing the doorbell. So I don't know if you saw, I smoked the entrance before I opened the colony to move them in here, but I just smoke the entrance a little and just to kind of let them know I'm going to be interacting with them. And then I don't really use smoke a lot. It's if I happen to get stung, I'll remove the stinger right away and smoke the spot where the stinger was, because that, you know, there's the alarm pheromone. So if I left it, there would be that. So I mask that scent. But other than that, I just will smoke around the edge a little bit to scoot everybody inside, and then I'll put the top on. It's like, you know, the bees, so the way they communicate with scents, it's like trying to talk in a crowded room. If it's noisy and you can't really hear things, you can't hear what someone is saying. So when you smoke them, they can't talk to each other with scents because it masks all those scents. So it masks the alarm pheromone. I'm using pine needles. My favorite is to use dried leaves. There's some things like tobacco, black walnut that can be used medicinally. In the hive, it's interesting because you know, so many things are used in indigenous cultures as ritual, but plant medicines. But the bees respond to that too. So I don't like to use pine. You know, I kind of glean smoker fuel wherever I am. The pine, I feel, burns kind of too hot, and it's kind of, I think it's kind of acrid smelling to the bees. So really my favorite is to use just dried leaves. There are some beekeepers at Spikenard. They have biodynamic gardens everywhere. It's really beautiful. Spikenard is what inspired Apiopolis. But they actually use the plant stems from their gardens, leaves and stems, in their smoker fuel. And there are some beekeepers that will grow grasses specifically for smoker fuel that are sweet smelling to the bees. I'm just kind of scooting everybody in. So Flitch Furniture that is working on this, producing this hive, makes modern furniture. They're local, and they use this slot and tab system. It's a dog bone joint, and that's what you can see here on their modern furniture. So we're seeing if it will work on the colonies that we're making, on the boxes that we're making. So if I had a dream shelter, it would be a hollow tree cavity. But like I said, we want everybody to keep their bees in healthier houses. I saw a bumper sticker on my way here that said, "Trees are the answer." So we're still working on different things with the hive to make it better, but getting there. I can't remember if I said when I closed them this morning at 5, I put a screen in the entrance and blocked the holes with corks, and then put a big net over the colony, so if any workers got out, and they did, I would keep them. It always hurts me to leave anybody behind who's working so hard, because they can't live without their family. So if I do swarm gathering or rescues, I put everybody in a box, and then I go back after dark when everybody is home and move the colony then, so I save everybody that I can. Okay. And I guess this girl has a name, right?
Yes, so Mayor Pro Tempore Nicole Stewart is going to be joining us in just a minute to announce the name of our new queen bee. So that name has been selected from submissions made by local elementary school classes, and we're very excited to learn the new name of our queen bee.
I'm not going to leave this because it's super hot. Am I done? The quote that we always hear from Einstein about the bees is that if we lost them, we would have 4 years to live. There are always uncertainties with a rescue because you just don't know what you're going to find until you open them up.
My dad bought this farmland around this house about 10 years ago. We noticed just a big swarm of bees on the second floor. So at the time, they relocated that swarm, but 5 years later, we noticed a new hive was down here on the lower level. So that's these guys.
So a lot of folks might not think that this wild colony is worth saving. We think they're all worth saving, but especially the ones that have shown local resilience. And the comb potentially could be 8 feet tall, so it'll be amazing. Often I get rescue calls and the people say the alternative would be to poison them. It's heartbreaking to disturb something that's so perfect and amazing. If we weren't removing all the trees, they would have hollow tree cavities that they could move into instead of house walls.
At our first meeting, Alice had explained the honeybee population was dramatically declining. It was urgent that we focus on honeybee housing.
We're always interested in the challenge. Can we make it work within this set of circumstances?
So that's the top of the comb, Richard.
Gorgeous. Wow. Is this a big
Yes, it's a big, the comb is amazing. It's a big colony. There's nothing square about bees, so they build in this beautiful natural curve.
Alice has put together a team that has created this mass-producible object that has an opportunity to change our environment, and for the better, for once. We got to use all of our collaborative skill sets to do some good.
The mission of Apiopolis is to restore honeybees to a place of thriving. And by creating a better world for the honeybees, we create a better world for us. I learned to not wear gloves from the beginning because if you're wearing gloves, you can't be careful. You're interacting with tiny creatures, you'll inevitably squish them. My worry is that they're going to leave the comb, and if they did that, they would die. I'll put them in a different box, the new shelter that we've been working on, that has insulation, that has food and comb, that they can start laying babies again. The bees that we took from that cavity are like a swarm now. The dream for the new shelter has been long in my mind. I have to give them a better house. So to work with so many amazing people on designing it and having it come together like that, that is actually amazing, because I feel like that is something that I can contribute to improve things for the bees. I have to go slowly if I'm interacting with them, and it becomes almost a meditative practice of observation, of engaging all my senses, the scent of the hive, the sounds they're making. When the bees land on me, I feel like we're in relationship. There's a knowingness. Like any creature, they sense my energy toward them, and I feel like they respond. in kind. Sorry about your sisters. It is a queendom, and it's the females that do all the work in the colony. It's a nurturing, creative environment. I also think of it in terms of the world. We say Mother Earth. So I always come back to what a metaphor the bees are, what great lessons we can learn from them and how they work together and take care of each other in our communities. The next time you come upon a bee on a flower, I wish that we would think about their lives and what they need and what they contribute to the world. Cheers to the bees. You guys were all amazing. It's been so humbling, so thank you all.
It's beautiful.
Isn't it pretty? That was one of the requirements. Yeah. There are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Stewart, and I'm Mayor Pro Tem of Raleigh, and I bring greetings on behalf of our Mayor and City Council to the Hive Stream event. It really is an honor to be here with you on World Bee Day. There's actually been a lot of buzz about this event, as it's not often that a democratically elected individual like myself gets to name a queen. It's like history is reversing. This might just come back and sting us. And yet, here we are at this exciting moment. A new reign before us, one that we hope will make downtown rich with honey and pollinated plants. So I want to say a special hi to all of our friends in elementary school who have been working so hard this year, both virtually and in person while wearing a mask. As a mom to 2 kids, your age, hi Evan and Liza. I know how challenging this year has been, and I am so proud of all of you. And thanks to all of you who participated in this fun naming contest. It really feels awesome to have something to celebrate today. We haven't had many chances to gather together, and the fact that this is one of the city's first events as life gets back to normal is so special. Today brings a wonderful reminder of the small joys that sustain us, like children, our environment, and beautiful outdoor public spaces that everyone can enjoy. Today also represents one of the many lessons that the pandemic has taught us, that we all need to commit to making sustainable choices. I know we have many more people planting gardens in their backyards and trying to grow food and flowers at home. What a great silver lining to take with us from the past year. And as we've learned more about just how powerful and productive our outdoor spaces can be, we're also reminded of how important it is to protect pollinators and to do everything we can to help them thrive. A special thanks to our beekeeper, Alice, in Apiopolis for installing this hive at the Duke Energy Center for the Performing Arts. This is a flowerific addition to the hive they installed in front of the Raleigh Convention Center. So the moment we have all been waiting for, it's time to announce the winning name of our new queen bee. There were so many great suggestions from school classrooms across Raleigh. So some of those folks were Miss Labadee from Powell, Miss Callie, we've got Adele's crew, Jaquetta's crew, Jen's crew, Maggie's crew, Rachel's crew, and Anna's crew from the Explorer School. We have Miss Bray, both 3 through 5 domain and K2 domain, Miss Ali, 3-5 domain, K2 domain, Miss King, 3-5 domain, K2 domain, Miss Rothra, 3-5 domain, K2 domain, and Miss Rhodes' class, all from Powell Center for Play and Ingenuity, Magnet Elementary as well. So thank you to all those kids, all those classes, all those teachers for their hard work. And now the winning suggestion that was selected comes from Miss Gina Ali's kindergarten to 2nd grade class from Wake County Public School System's Powell Center for Play and Ingenuity, Magnet Elementary. And our new queen's name will be Queen Elizabeth. Yay! That's it. So yay, we're really excited, and thank y'all so much for being here with us today. I think we're going to get back to watching our bee hive be installed. Thank you.
I just wanted to say how fantastic it is that the city is doing this. Loves bees and pollinators and everything. But we are starting a fundraising campaign for the new shelters because we want to continue with research and development and to test them at scale and then get some of the researchers like Dr. Celia and Jürgen Tautz to test them with us so we can get them going. So that's coming up too.
That's awesome.
And what about that market on Saturday? Has that been mentioned?
I don't think so. Noon to 3, market on Saturday.
Buzz
right
Market.
Here at Duke Energy Center. Yay!
Buzz Market, yeah.
Buzz Market.
The quote that we always hear from Einstein about the bees is that if we lost them, we would have 4 years to live. There are always uncertainties with a rescue because you just don't know what you're going to find until you open them up.
My dad bought this farmland around this house about 10 years ago. We noticed just a big swarm of bees on the second floor. So at the time, they relocated that swarm, but 5 years later, we noticed a new hive was down here on the lower level. So that's these guys.
So a lot of folks might not think that this wild colony is worth saving. We think they're all worth saving, but especially the ones that have shown local resilience. And the comb potentially could be 8 feet tall, so it'll be amazing. Often I get rescue calls and the people say the alternative would be to poison them. It's heartbreaking to disturb something that's so perfect and amazing. If we weren't removing all the trees, they would have hollow tree cavities that they could move into instead of house walls.
At our first meeting, Alice had explained the honeybee population was dramatically declining. It was urgent that we focus on honeybee housing.
We're always interested in the challenge. Can we make it work within this set of circumstances?
So that's the top of the comb, Richard.
Gorgeous. Wow. Is this a big
Yes, it's a big, the comb is amazing. It's a big colony. There's nothing square about bees, so they build in this beautiful natural curve.
Alice has put together a team that has created this mass-producible object that has an opportunity to change our environment, and for the better, for once. We got to use all of our collaborative skill sets to do some good.
The mission of Apiopolis is to restore honeybees to a place of thriving. And by creating a better world for the honeybees, we create a better world for us. I learned to not wear gloves from the beginning because if you're wearing gloves, you can't be careful. You're interacting with tiny creatures, you'll inevitably squish them. My worry is that they're going to leave the comb, and if they did that, they would die. I'll put them in a different box, the new shelter that we've been working on, that has insulation, that has food and comb, that they can start laying babies again. The bees that we took from that cavity are like a swarm now. The dream for the new shelter has been long in my mind. I have to give them a better house. So to work with so many amazing people on designing it and having it come together like that, that is actually amazing, because I feel like that is something that I can contribute to improve things for the bees. I always come back to what a metaphor the bees are, what great lessons we can learn from them and how they work together and take care of each other in our communities. The next time you come upon a bee on a flower, I wish that we would think about their lives and what they need and what they contribute to the world. Cheers to the bees. You guys were all amazing. It's been so humbling, so thank you all.
It's beautiful.
Isn't it pretty? That was one of the requirements. Yeah. There are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle.